And Alex is a member of our core team in Inspirali Award, so he's helping us, and
Yes.
he's our background in Asia.
Yes.
So, Alex Zane.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. First, I would like to thank Inspirali and Karel for this invitation. And today I'm going to talk about a few projects that we've been developing here in the past 5 years in our office, which is basically a short period of time for an architect to have much built projects, since as you know, in architecture, having something built is rare. So this is the office in Lebanon. Of course, architecture is never a solo act, so generating a good work environment is vital for a collective team effort. And we fly back 5 years ago. That was me during my graduation project day. Well, I looked so young back then. I still look the same, I guess. But this project was the catalyst that woke my awareness about the real meaning of architecture. That it's not about the physical object. Architecture is about human aspiration and the adaptive response to a need, in a way that the role of an architect is to be able to adapt a selfless architecture to any situation. And it's inevitably too powerful that its impact has the ability to manifest itself to change people's lives. So most of the prevailing flamboyant projects are limited to the small percentage of privileged people who actually have enough money to make great buildings, while the biggest percentage lies on the poor. Here's the thing. Architecture is for everyone, for every single human being. So we need to be able to work with scarce resources and inspire people with smart strategies, as well as give the best out of a specific budget. So in this lecture, I'm going to show you how we responded to several assignments, from a high-end architecture built for the rich to small cottage shelters built for homeless refugees. So we live in a world that has never found peace. There's always a war somewhere, there's always a natural disasters going on. So humanity often faces incidents that disrupt lives, whether if it was caused by humans in war, refugee crisis made by conflict policy, or by natural disasters such as earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, etc. And this is a recent example here. This is a photo taken from the International Space Station 2 months ago. This is Hurricane Dorian. Considered like one of the smallest examples among endless of other man-made and natural disasters that caused more than $165 billion of economical loss worldwide. And the result, we have more than 65 million people displaced in the world, in which 20 million are refugees. And 40% of these 20 million are Syrians. And by the year 2050, it is estimated that the number of immigrants could exceed the number of 200 million refugees in the world. And this is where they live. Informal settlements, slums. Just imagine yourselves living in here. And the large number of group, they live in UN tents in which the walls that separates them from the outside is a thin flex sheet that's barely sufficient to protect them from the intense outer climate, so they don't have access to the basic needs and facilities that struggles to provide the simplest aspect, much like what is needed for animals, or even less. So, in that sense, emanating from my senior project in 2015, this is when in Lebanon we faced an influx of 2 million refugees, almost like 1/3 of our population, and we couldn't bear this influx. So I said that this time it's not about the building. It's not a question of a spectacular architectural design, yet it's a question of humanity. And then I thought to myself that if I had to create an intervention for this issue that is seemingly tailored only to Lebanon, we're going to be facing the same problem over and over again in some other parts of the world. That's why we introduced systems in architecture, and these systems, they don't belong to a particular place, yet they adapt to belong to the whole planet. So 2 years later, we won the Project Earth 2 competition. We were asked to imagine these refugee camps as the cities of tomorrow somewhere in Europe, almost like a changing structure that would grow, adapt, and develop, and to break the isolator lines separating both communities. So we did an intervention in East Germany, since it suffers the collapse of communist-era industry, which sent employees, especially the youth, fleeing westwards with a sharp decline in the birth rate and an average age that surpassed the 45. So the smallest communities are bleeding residents, they're thriving for inhabitants. Simultaneously, Syrian refugees are thriving to inhabit somewhere, so it's a win-win situation. So the idea here is to sort of weave both communities by creating an open settlement that will allow refugees to sort of build their own settlement, build their own environment, but of course they have to follow guidelines and sets of construction rules given by the encoded system. So the project must be implemented in a vast agricultural area, not far away from German communities and forsaken factories. So it was in Weimar, Thuringia, since it's relatively fertile. And 48% of the services are used for agricultural production, and it's also in proximity to several leftover infrastructure and forsaken factories. So we have some sort of reclamation for the post-industrial landscapes in a way that refugees sort of squat these leftover infrastructure to bring them back to life. So their presence is going to bring positive side effect to the local communities in a way that the Germans can sort of benefit and utilize their skills and talents to fulfill aspirations of their inhabitants. So the project is based on a matrix in which you would understand the whole sophistication once you be able to understand this one cell, one matrix. It's made of a core and a periphery. It's a served and the serving. So the core is the main shaft. It contains all the services that the refugees need using natural energy resources. So we have the rainwater collector that collects water from gravity, and we have the PVs for electricity. And then we have the latrines and the kitchens. Those are like fixed features ready to be plugged in by the refugees. And the waste of the shelters is sort of treated and transformed with waste transformers in a way that the system has the ability to turn the soil into a fertile one. So we have a core and 4 plugins that are floated in an uplifted structure so we can protect the shelters from flooding, we can reserve place for infrastructure, and we can keep the land sane for future uses. And we shall also grow some perennial plants that will repel mice and small animals. So these are the rules and the standards we encoded in which refugees shall follow while building the shelters. For example, 69 modules is for 1 bed for 1 person, 9 to 12 is for 2, it's an open space, and so on. So in that sense, we can stimulate an infinite number of typologies that could be possibly built by them. So we never designed the shape, we actually designed the process that would generate the shape. And I firmly believe that studying the way nature solves problems will give us a lot of answers. That's why the structural element used for the skeleton of the shelters are bamboo canes taken from nature. Since they're strong, they're cheap, they're lightweighted, they're sustainable and flexible. But of course, we have to treat them, we have to encode them so it can be easily transformed and modified. And as for the walls, we use light-weighted EPS panels. Since they have some sort of structural capacity, they insulate well, and of course they're sustainable. And for the furniture, we use recyclable reinforced paper panels. So the construction of these shelters is very easy. It's just like building a tent in a forest. And what's really interesting about it, that it can be built in like 1 or 2 days. So they can cope and rebuild immediately. And they can get back to their own resources to maintain regular life and social functions. So as you can see, they build the columns, the beams, and then they add the sandwich panels in various forms and different materials and different ways that it can leave places for openings and doors and windows. So we sort of provide the refugees with all the materials and the tools, and for them to sort of just assemble things following the guidelines. But there's also this important phenomena called schooling. You know, refugees sort of learn as easy techniques in a socially active manner. That's essential. So there'll be like sort of corps of trained builders that will train others, and then the system will spread. So it's a permanent temporality instead of a temporal permanence. So for a precarious population, you sort of need a theory for the growth and for the shrinking so we can delineate the matrix. So we use the theory of fractals, because it describes the theory of nature as a self-organizing system. This is when we explore the same pattern in different scales. So the part looks like the whole. It's like a never-ending pattern. So in that sense, we have the cell, we have core, and 4 plugins. We have 4 families. Means this makes it a clan. So by stimulating 4 clans with another core that's serving 4 clans, we'll have a sub-tribe. And 4 sub-tribes will give us a tribe. And 4 tribes will give us a confederation, and so on. So it's a never-ending pattern. Part looks like the whole. You can see the same cell in different scales. And of course, the result, you have different clusters with different proportions in the constellation, leaving sort of negative spaces where refugees sort of harvest their own food, they produce their own agriculture, and they have some sort of businesses. So we can never say that this is the final shape or this is the final output of the mass plan, because it's continuously changing. But of course, we have squares of rules following it. So this is the project from the bird-eye view. And it's a self-sufficient settlement. It has to comprise all the needed functions for it to survive. So you need schools, you need kindergartens, you need commercial shops, you need health centers, etc. And as you can see, still we're building for poor. We're building for homeless and hopeless people, but still we find sort of aesthetical and spatial qualities. So it's as valuable as an ultra-expensive building. So this is our role as an architect, is to give the best for everyone. So moving on to from Germany to Kuwait, and particularly a competition I won in Kuwait City, and this time this project is for the Rich Association. So it was located in an old parking lot that once used to be a government hospital called Al Amiri Hospital, and it was torn down in the 1970s. So the aim was to sort of revitalize the place that once used to be a public destination for medical services, without mislaying its actual function, which is the parking lot. And they sort of asked us to create a greenhouse on its stuff so they can harvest medical plants. So we thought that instead of keeping the same structure as it is and try to establish a public space that does not actually blend with the parking lot, so the idea was to sort of shift the whole structure to the underground, leaving the ground level freely open to the vibrant city in a way that the public space and the public space and the gardens and the greenery will be like mixed together under one canopy. So in that sense, a microclimate shall be created inside these spaces that are leveraging the connections to the city. So we got inspired from a plan of a cell. So inspiring from the cell, the future projects itself from the old arches, creating some sort of contrast between the old and the new. And the perforated canopy sort of blatantly retract itself to create shades for the pedestrian from one hand and direct sunrise for the plants from another hand. So we didn't use glass. Instead, we used the high-strength polymer, which is 1% the weight of double glazing, so it adapts well to the high temperatures of Kuwait. So the metabolism of the project provides the end user with sort of a natural microenvironment and delicate spaces in a way that people could sort of meet and walk and sit amidst thousands of trees and plants, and they're going to be healthy and happy and comfortable. And now we're working on the construction documents of this project. Moving on to Lebanon, my country, and particularly in Beirut, the capital, and in a very dense, bustling district called Sheikh Ain Rumane. So this area faced 25 years of war, and the result, we have a lot of devastated and unfinished structures that looks like this. So in the last decades, investors attempted to replace these structures by sort of commercial residential blocks that looks like this. And the result, we nearly have 2% of greenery in the area. And we have a very high level of pollution with no public space. And usually in Lebanon, private space always remain private. So that's why in this case, we miraculously convinced the client to create some sort of public attraction by introducing some retails and coffee shops, as well as some gardens on the ground level and some offices on the first and second floor. So instead of taking the maximum footprint like the investors do so they can have as much apartments as they can, instead we sort of minimized the footprint to the minimum and went higher. And by going higher, you can benefit from the amazing views of Beirut, and of course you can benefit to have negative spaces for public attraction down here. Now, in order for us to retrospect all of the finished structures of the area, we sort of brought all the structural elements to the extremity to be part of the architectural design. Now, in order for us to neutralize the exceeded exploitation, we sort of subtracted parts of the nude slabs, creating some sort of motion across the facade and double levels for the greenery. And then on the top, we sort of deviated the structure so it could remind us of the resilience of Ain Rumane. So a simple, rational building has greenery that surpasses the 2% of the district. So as you can see, this is a building, and this is a rendering. So the building imposes itself as a sort of a inspiring landmark element that brings positivity to the context. And as for the structural elements, we cladded it with ACP panels so we can give it a strong character that would remind us of the period of our time. And we sort of recessed all the glazing systems in a way that sort of winter sun so goes into the apartment while summer sun creates shades within the apartment. So these nude slabs outside, they act as shading devices. So you can realize the connections from the inside out, how we connected the apartments to the amazing views of the Mediterranean Sea and the amazing views of Lebanon and Beirut. Now you can see how Lebanon is beautiful. We had another project in Beirut, in the heart of Jdeida. We had a sort of an office tower for a client that was asking for glass towers. So it infuses the street with a sort of muscular skeleton element that is fighting gravity. It has some sort of dynamism in the street. So you can realize we have double skin. We have this bracing structural white element with the glass system. So it has more than 100 offices and corporations and companies overlooking the amazing views of Beirut and the Mediterranean Sea. So architecture is sort of an anecdote in which a process would generate the final outcome. So we also had the opportunity to design dormitory project for Notre Dame University in Zouk. So the aim was to pragmatically separate the private study zone from the sort of a collective and common study area where scholars can meet and work together. So we got inspired from this this honeycomb structure. So a single dorm was defined by distorted wax. So by replicating and duplicating these waxes, we'll have this wall of cells. It looks like a honeycomb structure. And then we sort of rotate the whole element so it could fit inside a hexagonal side. In a way, we're living like gardens on each level. And then we sort of enlarge the ground floor so we can attract the public. And we have some sort of retails on the ground level. You can realize the scale of the car and the scale of the building and the dynamism behind it. We also had a small project in South Korea, particularly in a very quiet neighborhood in Seoul, surrounded by contemporary private houses. So we were asked to create 3 lofts, in which the biggest one is for the owner. Of course, we have to respect their surrounding and the context and the cultural tradition of Korea. So this is the site, 600 square meters, very small. So the built structure is sort of reminiscent of the Chinese sharply curving roof that was modified in Korea into a gently sloped, sharp-angled roof with strong lines and steep planes, inheriting some kind of quiet inner harmony and exhibiting some kind of naturalistic tendencies with avoidance of excesses. So we sort of created this Korean house with sharp-angled roof, and then we divided it into 3 lofts, in which the biggest one is for the owner and 2 small for rental. And then we perforated it for sun access, and the negative space here in the residual space was left for technicality and sort of a walkyard. And then we created the floors and we uplifted the ground floor. So we avoided the excesses by creating a pure form with pure white material, and we enhanced on the transparency. So we sort of try to attempt to respect the context and the cultural tradition, but at the same time, it has some sort of bold and audacious attitude compared to its surroundings. So this is the plans. On the ground level, we created a compacted reception area, and the private zones were left in the 1st and 2nd floor. This is one section. So it's a very small, compacted project. Even in the interior, you can realize we sort of like created a pure form in a way that even the ceiling was left nude, and we enhanced, of course, on the connections, natural connections from the inside out to the environment. So this project is now under construction. And architecture is really about the place and the people you're building for. And it has the ability to affect, to transform, whether through spaces like this, or building, or even a swan. So we sort of completed a landscaping project for a client that was really interested in swans. So he called the project Swan Lake Wedding. So this is the project. And it was actually located in a 4,000 feet altitude mountain called the Duar. This is the site. So the idea was to sort of create in the heart of the project this Swan Lake, and then it swirls around with all the other functions. So we have the ceremony area, and then the welcome drink area, the dining zone, and then we have the bungalow overlooks the amazing views of the Swan Lake. So we sort of created the guidelines, and we invited nature to design the spaces itself. So you can realize the space is created here by the lighting and the naturalistic tendencies. It makes people feel like they're in heaven, they feel comfortable. They feel well, and we've sort of created arches everywhere so it could remind us of where we are. Yes, we are in Lebanon. And we sort of extracted all the stones from the land while excavating, and we used it for cladding, and we used it for the leveling, so you can realize, we use it here, you can realize that it changes with the change of season. And we also had the chance to design studio sets for TV shows. So these are projects that can go very quickly. In like a course of a few months, you get to design the project and then you build it. So I think that these small projects really count, especially studio set designs, because it's like everybody watched them on TV and they wait for them every week. So this is the first project we worked on. It was a Hyundai startup competition. This is not really a band. That was me and the crew that worked on the project with 5 happy faces after it was completed. Well, so the idea behind the set is to sort of introduce the tungsten lamp that represents the idea pop-up. So this lamp became actually the main platform of the studio. And then down here on the top here, we've got the jury table that considered as the electrical pulse that evaluates the ideas. And then on each side of the lamp, we have 2 wings with multiple dispersed lamp with various scales that represents the variety of ideas. And then we sort of doubled the amount of the scene by creating an 8% reflective black floor. So this was the rendering, and this is a final output. So the material used for the wings were styrofoam, because it works really well with the lights. I'm going to show you a small video of the project.
She said she too young, don't want no man. So she gon' call her friends, now that's a plan. I just ordered sushi from Japan. Now yo bitch wanna kick it, Jackie Chan. Drop top, how we rollin' down on Collin South Beach. Yeah. Look like Kelly rollin', this might be my destiny. She want me to eat it, I guess then it's on me. I got you, know I got the sauce like a fucking recipe. She just wanna do it for the grand. She just want this money in my hand. I'ma give it to her when she dance, dance, dance. She gon' catch a Uber out the Calabasas. She said she too young, don't want no man. So she gon' call her friends, now that's a plan. I just ordered sushi.
So after the same year, we were so lucky to win the competition of the high-ranked comedy talk show called La Honubes. So this show has a very high percentage of viewers. So it was really lucky. So it was conceived within 3 parameters. First, we have this length window that stretches the city background to give this late night show aspect. And then on each side we have these distorted walls. And then on the middle here we have the main platform of the host, defined by a circular swirling element with 4 migrating black strips that are climbing up to reach endlessness. And then on the left side we have the band defined by 5 migrating black strips that are climbing up to reach infinity. So we can realize that we also doubled the amount of the scene here. Now I'm going to show you a small part of the show. It's going to be really funny, but there's no sound here. I expected to have sound. So you can realize how they really, they create comedy and really enjoy their times at the studio. So it's a very cynical show. So you can see that really architecture and the design behind it will allow them to do so many funny things. So that's an interesting part of it. So even like they get to enter like motorcycles inside. So you can see now. So it's really interesting, the fact that you get to design something that's really turning around the camera and giving a lot of sort of interaction. So after 3 years, we became the exclusive designers of this show, and we just completed the 5th season of La Honubes, and it was very privileged to me, and it was kind of conceived by this weed leaf. Okay, so how did the idea come? Well, actually, I was sitting with the band members and the coulisses, and they sort of drink alcohol before they go live, so they can get into the mood. So I was sitting with them, drinking with them. So the idea came to my head that what might actually happen? What might happen if they get to smoke weed before they go live? It was just a random question in my head. And then the next day, they called me to design the 5th season. So the first idea was a question that I asked them: why don't I introduce this weed leaf to become the main platform? So I did. And we sort of created this sort of weavy, fluid movement that connects the band with the host and the guest. And so the design areas is bluish tone to make people feel like home. And we have this sort of framed window overlooking the black and blue city background to create this aspect of a late night show. And then behind the band we have this sort of strips that are like swirling and turning around, the rotation. And then this time we sort of introduced a sort of a performance stage where artists can sort of express themselves and perform, and they can access from here directly. So this was the renderings, and this is the final output. And as you can see, of course, whenever it's completed, whenever it's executed, of course it's way better because people animate the space more. And when the director just makes his like images and just work on the lighting, and the lighting designer will like work on all the elements, and you have a really good result. So we also designed the special guest platform right next to it. So the imagined virtual can actually become reality. And architecture really has the power to transform, to affect, to inspire, and most importantly, to change people's lives. Because everyone means everyone. Everyone deserves a clean and dignified place to live and be happy. And thank you very much.